Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Chitti Media and the Festival of Bharat. My name is Sharan Sethi and I'll be your host for this program. Joining us today for a conversation is Advocate M.R. Venkatesh ji. He is a very well-known author and a legal counsel as well. And his talks on a range of issues have been widely popular on YouTube. Namaste, Venkatesh ji. How are you? I hope everything's well.
Everything is well and all's fine. Tell me. So, good evening to you and to your viewers too.
Very good evening, and do tell us a little bit about your new book before we get into discussing more about economics.
My new book has been titled Retaining Balance, the Eternal Way. It's about civilizational economics from an Indian perspective. Economics, as we have seen from as a discipline, is basically a Western discipline.
Right.
And to quote Mahatma Gandhi, whatever is there of Western civilization, whether it is there or not, is left to one's imagination. So the economics that is rooted to Western civilization is one of imagination. It is not complete. So I have taken on as to how India's or Bharat's economy, I would say, is different from, say, the Western economics, and how civilization and culture play a very important role, of which the family is the fundamental unit of function in our society, our culture, our traditions, our civilization. And how, when I say family, I mean only the monogamous family. I don't mean the polygamous family. I don't mean a marriage where you have this idea of live-in relationships. I don't have the idea of fathers missing. I don't have the idea of a place where families are destroyed by government policies, which is what is happening in the Western world. So I have parallelly gone back and forth on several issues to the Western economy and compared it what it is with India. And I have drawn very heavily from Ramayana and Mahabharata as to explain how traditionally our societies are conjured or imagined by our seers, our sages, our great thinkers, and what they believe should be the idea. I have also said that the constitution has been basically a Christian construct, and it is a rights-based constitution, whereas we are a civilization which is rooted to duties. In fact, you may come from a different place, different community, different caste, different language, different even different religion. But I come from a totally different background. But if I use the words karmanyavadikarasya, immediately you will understand what it means.
Right.
And that resonates right through, whether you are in Kashmir or Kanyakumari. So the larger point is we have to shift our constitution from a rights-based constitution to a duties-based constitution.
Right.
And probably this is the first important amendment that the next government has to probably do it. And going forward, I have pleaded that the next 25 years we must rewrite the constitution on our civilizational values to make economic sustainable in India. That's the larger point that I have made.
Extremely interesting. I think the entire discussion can be about your book alone, because you're bringing in such new concepts, or rather revisiting old concepts which have been forgotten over a period of time. But today we are here to have a very interesting discussion on the residual socialism in India's economic governance. And socialism is something that I take immense interest in discussing about, because I, as a student of, economics was one of my interests, of course, in college. And what I was more interested in was how Swatantra Party was way ahead of its time back in the day when Nehruvian socialism dictated the economic policies. So let's take this one by one. And of course, it's a lot to cover since we are talking about the last 50, 70 years. But I know that you'll do absolute justice to this. Before Nehru became the prime minister, there were a few committees which were instituted by the British and the interim government of India, and they came up with something called as the Bombay Plan. This was very interesting, and this actually had a lot of solutions that could have retained balances in a proper way. by also acknowledging the welfare schemes that may have been necessary at that point of time because our human indices were very low, right?
See, when we were born, we had two great men who were heralding the independence movement. One was Nehru, one was Gandhiji. And to put it very crudely, Gandhiji believed in profits but not in technology. Nehru believed in technology but not in profits. So it is a very confused nation, that whether to believe in technology or profits, and the nation did not believe in either. So we were people who traditionally respected both wealth and technology. And in fact, at several places, several of our temples, we have spectacular demonstration of technologies or advancement in science. When I say science, it's not only pure science. It could be mathematics, it could be anything, geography. The inquisitiveness of man to research and search for truth has been phenomenal, and that has been placed in a temple for demonstration. In fact, I always give this example, the Tanjavur temple. You see the Gopuram. They tell us that the shadow of the Gopuram does not fall on the ground. Even when the sun moves from the Cancer to the Capricorn. Okay. Now, what does it imply? There is a message to this. The message is, I know where is Tanjavur, what is longitude and latitude of Tanjavur. I know where the sun goes up to in the north of northern hemisphere. That is the topic of Cancer. And when the earth tilts, what is the downward tilt, whether it goes up to tropic of Capricorn. And I know precisely where is the earth and Tanjavur within the planet Earth. And so I have created this temple to simply demonstrate I know so many things. Okay, apart from the architectural marvel that it is, that I know so many things about geography. So our quest was always to pride on these things and to demonstrate and put it into a temple, because temple is one place where nobody would touch till the Muslim invaders came in the 10th century AD. Nobody ever touched a temple, and temple was a sacrosanct place, and people could go study, further research or whatever, and take it forward. Now let me come to 40s and 50s. See, this idea that the state should occupy the commanding heights of the economy, or what is called as the welfare state, stems basically from the London School of Economics report called the Beveridge Report. And Beveridge probably prepared it for the Labour Party, a very secret report for post-war Britain, which was based on Germany's idea of a loose welfare state.
Right.
And Germany had what is called as, Germany was called as an ambulance state in the early part of 20th century. I think they had ambulances and others to pick up people who were not well. This I'm talking about 100, 150 years ago. And then that idea was developed that the state will provide you something more in terms of, and that probably suited the British economy in the war-torn economy. And this Beveridge report was prepared basically keeping in mind that the welfare state will be done or will be the future of Britain post-war. Incidentally, only a few copies were printed or typed. And one copy was, it was so secret that nobody knew it even in Britain. But one copy was available in Hitler's bunker. Hitler had this copy of this report. So you can understand there is nothing called secret in government. Okay. So even in those times, even in these times, electronic times, you can understand that. But those times when people used to type it only, a copy of it was available. Yeah. But Nehru had this fascination of this external ideas. Somewhere external ideas impressed him more than internal one. In fact, in the Constituent Assembly debate, he says, look at the Irish, French, Italians. I don't know why he said Italians, but the curse is on us for eternity. So he says, and we borrowed fraternity, equality, and liberty, the slogans of the French Revolution, into our preamble of the Constitution right from the French. So Nehru was basically a person who was always outward looking rather than inward looking. He was more Christian than Hindu. In the sense, the Christian idea is always look outside for salvation. The Indian idea is to always look at inside. So what happens is that when he looks at least post-war government, when he looks at Stalin, when he looks at several of those leaders worldwide. He imbibes those ideas, and that's how a welfare state and the commanding heights of the global economy was born in India. And at that time, somewhere Nehru felt that all these laws that the British had created, he did not understand, was basically to ensure that the Indian businessmen did not create profit so that the British could create profit. So in our entire system, we borrowed from the British, and instead of Attlee, we had Nehru as the Prime Minister. And the same set of laws were followed, and it was impossible to make profits in India and keep ahead of the technology, because Nehru believed that I have created a laws wherein you can never make profits, and I will tax you to death. And if you are making profits, obviously you are violating the law. So nobody could make profits except violating the law. That is how in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even up to the 80s, you will find the Hindi cinema, or most of the Bollywood, Tollywood, Hollywood, name it, whatever it is, you will find all of them having the villains as big businessmen. And big businessmen meant that they broke the law, because the laws were so stringent that they would never allow anybody to make profits, anybody to run a successful business. And this Bombay Club was basically trying to tell the typical ethos of India that we would like to make profits. Unfortunately, as you said, they did not gain traction. And Nehru's voice, being the most towering leader of those times, we did not have anybody to champion Swadharma, Swadeshi, Swabhiman, Swavalamban. All these swas were Swaha. So they did not get a new economic blueprint for India, and these were all modeled on the Western ideas.
Right.
And the West has moved ahead. Yeah. Nobody talks about Beveridge Report in, say, British, say after 70s, when Margaret Thatcher followed the Hackett model. Yeah. And Reaganomics moved far ahead of Carter, and he destroyed. In fact, there is a wonderful book titled The Commanding Heights of the Global Economy, The Battle for the Commanding Heights of the Global Economy. Joseph Stanislaw is the author. If some people can read it, it captures the history of the world economics between First World War and, say, 1990s. Till the onset of globalization, 60, 70 years of history. And that was brought down as a 6-hour documentary by the BBC also. It's a very interesting one where youngsters can have a look at it also.
Right.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.